Hello, welcome to the weekly OK Preps Extra podcast. I'm Patrick Prince, joined as always by Barry Lewis, Dean Ruhl. They are done making camp in Edmond. They have seen all the state title games and saw some dramatic events as usual. So now we're going to sit here and try to digest and talk about it all. So, guys, welcome back to Tulsa at least. Or Dean, are you in Tulsa or are you somewhere else?
I'm in Tulsa right now.
All right. Okay. So we're all in the 918. Okay. Let's start with 681 with Bixby. I mean, we talked, guys, in the week leading up to the game, never count out a Bill Blankenship team. He sort of willed that team to get to the 6A title game. It's sort of, as that game went along, you saw Bixby kind of impose their will kind of early in the game. Barry and Dean, we'll talk about the game a little bit, but then we'll kind of get into the larger picture. Barry, just your impressions of Bixby and kind of not only what you saw last weekend, but their season in general. I mean, to say they have it really going there in Bixby is a massive understatement.
Yes, it is. And before I get started on that, I would like to say I was 1-1 on those never count out a team last week because obviously Owasso lost, but I also said don't count out a Dale Condick coach team for Wagoner, and we'll get to that later. But anyway, about Bixby, yeah, it's just such a juggernaut. I mean, the 38-35 loss to Jenks in week 10, that was just a weird night. I mean, and kudos to Jenks for playing a perfect game, but Jenks, just such a dominant program. 8 out of 9 years winning a state title is incredible. It's mind-blowing. And to be in the championship game every year, in the way they do it, I mean, just dominating so often. It is really it's one of the all-time top eras of high school football by one team. So, I mean, a decade nearly of sustained championship level play. When you think about maybe the greatest teams of all time in Oklahoma high school football, this Bixby team would have to be among them. I mean, if you're going to say, is this the greatest team of all time? I think, first of all, before you did that argument, you'd have to say, is this the greatest Bixby team of all time? Because
is it, Barry?
I think last year's might have topped this year's. But if you wanted to say, is this the greatest team of all time in the largest classification, just for argument's sake, so you can maybe simplify the argument, because I think last year's Bixby team was better than this year's, perhaps. I mean, although this year's team had to play a tougher schedule, so there's so many things to weigh in that. But okay, just for argument's sake, is this the greatest, largest classification team of all time? Those that belong in the argument, I can't say it was the greatest season of all time because of that one loss to Jenks. They were not an undefeated team. However, if I was going to hold a tournament, a playoff with the 8 greatest teams of all time, would I bet against this Bixby team? Maybe not. But teams that I would have in that tournament are, I would have the 2019 Owasso team, 2018 Broken Arrow team, 2002 Union team, 1997 Jenks, and then Booker T, the 67, 69, and 73 teams would belong there too. So when I think of greatest teams of all time, at least that I have seen in the state's largest classification, those are the teams that come to mind. And also a team that's sort of like, I would throw in there too, would be 2010 Jenks. Probably, I would say they're the greatest team not to win a state championship. Again, but if you put them in the tournament of this, our fantasy tournament here, it would be tough to pick against them too. They just happened to lose the championship game by 3 points against Union in the final second. Still probably the greatest championship game I've ever seen. So that Jenks team in 2010 also deserves to be in the discussion as far as the all-time top teams. But as far as the all-time greatest seasons, I think you would have to narrow it down to undefeated teams. And so this year's Bixby team and the 2010 Jenks team would not qualify under that standard. However, if you got into this fantasy tournament, they could play with any of those teams, other teams we mentioned.
2010, that was Sawyer Cole Morgan and Brandon
Yes.
Kitchen. That was that team, right? I'm remembering that
Yeah,
right.
Sawyer Cole Morgan, and he played a great game. It was just such a classic game. So in Union, the Dreamweaver play, won it in the final seconds, but just it was a classic game. So yeah, those are the teams that come to mind. This Bixby team, I mean, the way, especially this year and last year, I mean, look how they finished off the season, just dominating in the state championship game. I mean, just total blowouts. The 2018 Broken Arrow team, they were such a juggernaut until the last two games of the season when they played a pair of one-score games in the semifinals against Owasso and in the championship game against Jenks. So that's the only, I mean, that's sort of the only thing that maybe keeps me from saying that they're the best team of all time. But they deserve to be in the discussion. Absolutely. Noah Cortez, the running back, what a super year he had. And then the 2019 Owasso team, they were really dominant too. Cole Duggar had a great year at quarterback for them. Of course, that was a freshman. Cole Adams had a big part on that team too. So many great players on that team. Again, their championship game is just a one-score game against Jenks. Then the 1997 Jenks team, which I think a lot of people around here would say, ranks among the very best, argues that they could be the best with Rocky Kalmus, and they were certainly deserves to be in that discussion. It was similar to this year with Bixby in that they played in their team. They played in the championship game and blew out was a team with a lot of above average number of losses for a championship game. UConn came in that game. They were just 8-5. So it wasn't like really that classic state championship game matchup. And Jenks just totally overwhelmed UConn, as you would expect. And then you look at the 67, 69, 70, 73 Booker T. Washington teams with Coach Ed Lacey, such tremendous talent, and they were just so dominant throughout their seasons. If you look on the scores back then, if you did comparative score checks, it's sort of tough to compare eras because a big time blowout back in the 60s, early 70s would be like 42-0, 49-0. That would be the equivalent of 70-0 right now, just because the way the game is played. But those teams were just amazing teams. So it's fun to think about. And but this Bixby team certainly deserves to be. This year's and last year's team certainly deserves to be in the discussion.
Just real quick, Barry, before we get to Dean for a minute, just quickly, why do you give last year's Bixby team a slight edge over this year's Bixby team?
Because of Braylon Presley, the state player of the year. This year's Bixby team didn't have any performances, which I guess that would be deemed by people a state player of the year. Like their all district team came out today, and no one from Bixby was named as one of the two MVPs in their district, which was a little surprising to me. So Cale Fugate was the defensive player of the year, but so I think Braylon Presley had what a talent he is. And of course he's in the news today. So I think he took that team just to a little bit higher level than this year's team. I mean, if you're going to play them against each other, I think he might be the difference maker because there's a lot of the same people involved. So I think that's why I would give that team an edge.
Dean, it's not a shock that Bixby won handily, but did it shock you with how handily it was? I mean, Yeah, that really shocked me that it was to that degree where they almost put up 70 points. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, a 63 point differential is going to surprise you. I don't care who they're playing. In terms of just execution, they had it all going, and I don't want to spend too much time overlapping with what Barry said because he really wrapped it up in a tight, neat little bow. What they were able to do on Friday, but when you look at that Bixby team and the numbers and the stats that they've been putting up all year, it was hard for me to go into that game and say this is going to be a 69-6 win. I think you put Owasso more on the level of a Jenks, who was able to hold them. They won by 3 in the first meeting. They lost by 14 in the next. I expected something more like that, but that Bixby defense shut down, the Mason Willingham a couple minutes into the game breaks a, whatever it was, 54-yard touchdown run. And it's about all the Wasp was able to do on offense against that Bixby defense. So that's surprising, I think. And that's really a testament to what Lauren Montgomery's done over there.
I think, Dean, also, I think there are a couple other factors in that game. I think it was going to be an uphill battle for Owasso in that game anyway. But when Anthony Hill's really their best deep receiving threat didn't play in the game, I mean, Owasso already obviously lost a couple of big playmakers really from the get-go this season. And then when you lose Anthony Hills, who was a factor in the semifinal game, and he's not playing the other night, that just really limited Owasso offensively. Wouldn't make any difference ultimately, but Mason Willingham, I mean, Anthony Hills, I think, was a big part of their offense late in the season. And also how we'd never seen this before, how a team would react after playing 6 overtimes the previous week. I think that may have had an effect on Owasso. I mean, they wouldn't use that as an excuse, but I think that probably drained a lot out of them. So I think those were two things that, and Bixby takes advantage. I mean, my goodness, they'll take advantage of any weakness you have. And it was just quite the performance.
The Bixby defense, you could kind of feel it on the sidelines. They were pumped and excited and making hits, making tackles, flying around the ball. They looked motivated and ready to go. I want to ask you both this. I thought this was a real interesting call. What'd you make of the onside kick? Is in the first quarter, right? Wasn't it 14-6 at that point?
Yes.
What did you make? I'll get both of your reactions. We'll start with you, Barry. What'd you make of that call? I mean, you can look back now and say it was a great call for Bixby because it worked and they scored. And you wrote, Barry, that it was kind of the turning point of the game, you felt, because they go score and suddenly it's 21-6. But let's say you don't, it's 14-6 and you don't get it, and then Owasso goes scores. I mean, I thought that was an interesting call. What'd you make of it?
Well, I think, Lord Montgomery's coach was a turning. Owasso left the door open when they committed the personal foul on the conversion, and then that prompted Bixby, because the improved field position when they moved the kickoff up, to try something like that. And so why not go for it? And Dylan has recovered, and the rest is history. Bixby just rolled down the field, and I mean, that just shows you. But anyway, that's something they might have tried to do anyway, even without the penalty. I mean, they've got so much confidence in their defense, and it's just, they're just so strong in every phase of the game.
Dean, what about you?
Yeah, I spoke with Dylan Haas after the game, and something I just asked, what went into that decision, and he said this was something they'd been practicing, where when they go down and score a touchdown and they're able to get that penalty on the ensuing kickoff, they liked their odds on the onside kick there. To me, I think it's a smart play, because from where you're kicking off, even if they recover it, it puts them at about their 35-yard line, Barry, give or take a couple of yards there. And when you've got a Bixby defense, I don't care where you start with the ball, it's going to be a hard thing to move down the field and score consistently. So I think they just like their odds there, that worst case, we get it and we're on the edge of the red zone. or best case, we get it. We're on the edge of the red zone. Worst case, they start at their 35-yard line, and they like their odds to be able to stop them.
Yeah. Well, guys, what do you think? You want to talk a little 6A2 now? Anything else you want to mention about 6A1?
I think we've covered 6A1, as Bill Blankenship, I think, said so well. We just ran out of magic.
Is he going to retire, Barry?
I don't think he even knows right now. I mean, he told us last week that he would take some time after the season and talk with his wife and, see what he should do.
What's your gut feeling?
Well, I'm going to say my gut feeling was this might be a good time because of what a magical run it was this year. I mean, short of winning a state championship, this would be a great note to end on. But again, I mean, we should know fairly soon, I'm going to predict. I mean, I would say by early January, but because a lot of times those things are done by then. If there's going to be if a coach is going to step down. So, but we'll see. But it would be, if this was the last season for him, what a way to go out. What a great season it was, and what a great run for the Owasso Rams.
Yeah. All right, let's talk 6A2, where Stillwater, after some close calls in previous years, got the state title. Tucker Bernard leading the Pioneers to an undefeated season, their first state title since 67. You both saw that game. Dean, let's start with you. You've seen Stillwater a couple times this year. Just what do you make of Stillwater's season, not only in the title game, but what they did all season long, going undefeated?
So yeah, I mean, we talked about it with Bixby. I'll talk about it with Stillwater. That's a team that really likes its defense, and it likes to win games on the defensive side. And you saw that when you're going up against one of the state's best with Choctaw's quarterback Steele Wazell. They intercepted him 3 times. That's the difference maker. They were able to stall out those drives. They were able to turn those into points, and the final score makes it look closer than it is. 26-21. That was really a 14-26 ball game. Choctaw was able to drive down, score with 9 seconds left, and attempted an onside kick. But yeah, Stillwater built itself on its defense. It won its state title with that defense. Gage Gundy and Noah Roberts did what they have been doing all season and getting points on the board offensively. But that's really, I think, where Stillwater came from, and that's how the nuts and bolts of how they won this one. On top of that, Choctaw committing 16 penalties is going to help any team win a game. That's a hard to commit 16 penalties is a hard thing to win. But I think those are the numbers that really stick out: 3 interceptions and 16 penalties. That's how I think you can best tell the story of this game. And in terms of for the Stillwater community, I think it's great, everything that they've had to go through this past week. I wrote about it a little bit in my story from that game, but it's been emotional for them with everything going on, and they were able to go out and win their first state title since 1967, like you said, Patrick.
Barry, your thoughts?
Well, Dean, we can't agree on just everything. So I will differ with you a little bit on the fact that the final score was deceiving. Yes, it was an effect whenever you score with 9 seconds to go that I guess can make it a little deceiving, but Choctaw, they racked up a lot of yards, but they just self-destructed with some really uncharacteristic interceptions. Choctaw had their chances. They outgained Stillwater, and again, self-destructing with 16 penalties, as you mentioned. So it was a very interesting game, and it was really also interesting to me to think back to watching those two teams play in August back in the Jenks Trojan preview when we thought this might be a potential championship matchup, and how the games sort of played out somewhat similarly. Stillwater won by 3 points back in August, where Choctaw again scored a late touchdown, and Stillwater didn't pass for hardly any yards in either of the games. Back in August, I thought it was just they were just playing it, as Tucker Bernard said, close to the vest. Well, the other day is Gage Gundy just couldn't do anything throwing the ball. Of course, we found out he was injured. So their one really big pass play was on a trick play by a reserve quarterback, and that was really a turning point in the game when they scored right before the end of the first half to get it tied up going into halftime. So, but Stillwater, what a season, undefeated season. And Noah Roberts, what a year he had at running back. So congratulations to the Pioneers.
Now, what year is Noah Roberts?
He's a senior.
Okay, so they're going to lose another Gundy and Noah Roberts. Tucker Bernard's had a Gundy at the helm for a number of years. Do we know who next year's quarterback's going to be?
We do. So they have a kid, right? Well, based just on the roster, I would assume it now goes to Connor Quintero. He's an interesting kid. He's already got an offer from Oregon. So I think it'll be a story. Now, granted, you never know who steps up. He might stay in the backup role. But if you just look through their roster, I think they're expecting him to be the kid next year.
Okay. All right. Barry teased it earlier. You want to talk a little 4A?
Yeah, what a turnaround again.
I mean, okay, hold on, Barry. So I agree with you 100% what you said leading up to the game about don't count out Dale Condit. This guy can coach. He's been doing it a long time. We all know this. But, I mean, how realistic was it to think that they would go in and beat previously unbeaten Cushing? I mean,
I didn't think it was very realistic at all. I mean, but I do, whenever I say that, it's like because the respect that Bill Blankenship or Dale has earned with all their state titles throughout the years, and just having seen them do some amazing things before, like if anyone could pull off something like this, they can, them and their staffs. Because I had mentioned going into last week, remember last year when Owasso beat Broken Arrow by 39 in the regular season, and Broken Arrow wins in the playoffs. So big turnarounds can happen. I mean, big reversals can happen. I did not expect it. And especially the way Cushing started out, they're leading by 14 in the second quarter. And I'm thinking, well, Cushing's just on their way to another blowout. And then there was a play. It was like around midfield, 4 minutes to go in the second quarter. Wagner's got a 4th and 4. And there was a tipped pass that somehow was caught by Braden Skeen for Wagner, I believe it was, for the first down. And that was a turning point, because then Wagner goes ahead and scores. Another big turning decision was they had the ball at the 6-yard line, I believe, with 6 seconds left, and they went for the touchdown instead of the field goal, or at least took a shot at it. Whit Edwards pulls down the touchdown pass. So it's now 21-14 going into half instead of 21-7. And Wagner, throughout the game, if Wagner does not first of all, if Wagner on that drive does not convert that 4th down at midfield, I see Cushing getting the ball, going down and scoring. It's 28-7 at half, and it's all over. So one play can make a huge difference. That being said, from a Wagner standpoint, Wagner basically followed the script that Jenks did to beat Bixby. And what you've got to do, don't, chew up the clock. Play keep away from your opponent's explosive offense. Wagner did that. They held the ball 2-to-1 ratio, time of possession. Don't commit penalties. Don't commit unforced errors, turnovers. You follow that, and you got a chance to pull off the upset. I thought Wagner may have let some opportunities go early in the game when they had 2 trips inside the Cushing 30 and came up empty. But other than that, it was just like they just followed the script to pull off an upset perfectly.
Is this the first time, Barry, that Wagner has won as a non-favorite? Like they're used to being elite. This is the first year where they've kind of, not been one of the favorites.
I would say so. I would say that this was the first time you would really consider them an underdog. This is the first time I would have considered. It was somewhat reminiscent of 2005 when they reached the state championship game in his first year there as a huge underdog. They did not win that year. But Wagner's usually in the other role. They're usually the favorite. So Wagner, just an amazing story. All year long, people ask me, what's wrong with Wagner? What's wrong with Wagner? They've got 3 losses. Well, look who they lost to. They lost barely in the last seconds to Grove, which went undefeated in the regular season. Lost in the last seconds to Quita, undefeated in the regular season. And then they lost to Cushing. So there's nothing really wrong with Wagner all this time. They just played a tough schedule. And wow, what a gritty group of players. And what an amazing championship game that was. And for the second year in a row, the best game on championship weekend was the last game on Saturday night.
Mm-hmm. Dean, what'd you make of that last drive of the game that led to the game-winning field goal?
Yeah, so to me, I think Barry's 100% correct in a play like that with 6 seconds left before halftime, they get that touchdown there. But I think just as important was getting a 4th down stop midway through the 4th. They tackle Wagner tackles Cushing quarterback Blaze Berlowitz, and they get the ball back with 5 minutes and 9 seconds left. They ate up all 5 minutes and 9 seconds of that, kicked the field goal, and got the win there. So like Barry says, it's easy to put together a perfect game plan. It's hard to execute it. If you're going to leave it to somebody like Dale to be able to execute a perfect game plan, he's the guy I leave it to because he knows how to do it. He's been here. He's won these games. And to me, I think this is another feather in his cap of just excellence and perfectly doing what you need to do to win this game. He had the plan and they went out and they did it. And like Barry says, it's a tough, gritty group. They're built on that defense. I mean, this is a Cushing team that won its games this season by an average of 47 points.
Wagner, this is a different type of state title for Wagner in the fact that they didn't really have it. Well, it doesn't look like they've got that super duper star on their team, that huge big time playmaker. I think all the other ones had really huge big time playmakers. This was just a gritty group that played great as a team together. And so I think that makes it different than some of their other state championships. A big stat, I think that was really impressive coming into the game, which I thought, well, this might give Wagner a chance against Cushing, was, after they gave up 500 yards to Cushing in week 6, in the next 7 games after that, going into the championship game, they allowed a total of less than 500 yards. That is incredible. To average allowing teams like to 60 yards over a 7-week span. So that's quite a defense. And so, what do we hear all the time? It's a cliche, maybe not as relevant now as it used to be, but when it comes to playoff football, defense in a running game can take you a long way.
Yep, absolutely. Which one of you interviewed the kicker after the game?
We both did, I think, right?
Yep. We both talked to him.
Did you both talk to him? Barry, once you go, what was, what a moment for this kid. What a moment. What was it like talking to him, and how did he, I bet you could just feel the exuberance coming off him probably.
Oh, yeah. And what a story he is, because he missed really all of last year with the knee injury. So what a comeback for him. But I think as Dean also, observed that he was quite the moment for him. It was pretty overwhelming, I think, for him, because I think he was saying like his brain wasn't totally functioning because it's just such an amazing moment for him. When he tried to ask him, probably the magnitude of the moment may not have like totally hit him at the time, but Wagner is also a unique situation going into the game or going into the season where you thought, well, if there's going to be a close game, well, they're going to be in a really great shape because they've got 2 quality kickers. And they used both kickers in the game the other night. And was a little better from shorter kicks, one better on longer kicks, but they're both really good. They both had each 4 field goals this season going into the game. They alternate kicks, and it was Ethan Muhlenweg's turn. And and he booted it through the uprights. I mean, that was not an easy kick. I mean, it may have not won style points for the kick, but 36 yards, that's not, and especially in high school, not a total chip shot. Glad Dean was right there behind the uprights to get the video of the winning kick. So, but credit to the snapper and the holder, because, a lot of times those situations, that's not an automatic kick. So Wagoner did everything perfectly on that last drive, but you still got to make the kick. And 36 yards, that was impressive.
So, and you wrote about this, Barry. So that's literally what it came down to. It was just his turn. They were alternating kickers, and it just happened to be Ethan's turn.
That's what he said. Because it was sort of like in that middle range, because Ethan was more used for short kicks overall in the season, and Logan was for the longer kicks, and he had missed from 37. Logan Bloxham had missed from 37 earlier in the game. So that's what he said. It just came down to, it was his turn. They're both equally good. They're both really good. And, Cushing tried to ice him, didn't work. And he converted, and what a moment of a lifetime. He'll be a hero forever in Wagoner.
No doubt about it. Dean, I interrupted you a second ago. Go ahead.
I was going to say there was no style points earned on that final kick, but style points don't win you games, and kicking it through the uprights does. So, yeah, I think I caught him even before Barry caught him. And, I think that kid was pretty shell-shocked in the moment, and I don't think it even hit him what he had just accomplished. But to me, that's, I think, every kicker's dream to be in that position, or maybe every kicker's nightmare. I guess it depends on what kicker you talk to. But no, he was a little bit of a knuckleball kick, and I thought he might have missed it at first, but he got it, and Wagoner got their state championship.
Yeah, great job, Dean, by getting that on video. And yeah, that was his second game-winning field goal of the playoffs. He also made a shorter one against Tuttle in the quarterfinals. Now, that wasn't at the very end of the game. That was early in the fourth quarter. But still, 2 of their last 3 games were decided by his field goals.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about 2A a little, or I'm sorry, 3A. I've been confusing those classes all year long. Sorry. Crazy matchup between Metro and Heritage Hall out of Oklahoma City. You guys were both there. Dean, let's start with you. What'd you make of what you saw in that one?
Well, 3 records got broken, I think, for most points in a game, most points by a single team, and passing yards by a single player. So to say it was an offensive performance of a lifetime, I think would still even be an understatement. And it's hard to look and say, you take Kirk Francis and say, hey, he threw for 626 yards, but he lost. That to me is insane. It was just a good back and forth. I think a good clash of styles too. Heritage really liked their run game, and Metro liked the pass game. And so you got to see a very efficient run game and a very efficient pass game, and the clock ran out too quick, I think. Barry probably doesn't, because he had to he was on deadline on that one. But no, I think those two teams would have just kept throwing punches if the clock kept going.
Yep. Kirk Francis, I've been covering high school sports since the 80s. I've never seen anyone throw for over 500 yards, much less over 600 yards. And this is 626 yards against the state championship team. It's not against some team that's 0-10 and you're racking up yards. He's doing this against the best. It was very reminiscent to me, or I had the same feeling watching his performance as I did watching Josh Jacobs for McLean back into 2015 against Cassia Hall. Josh Jacobs that night racked up more yards as a running back than any game I've ever seen. He would have had 600 yards last night if a couple penalties hadn't occurred, wiping out big gains. But still, and I kept on thinking and they wound up losing that game against the team that was a 4A semifinalist. So And I kept on thinking at that time, Josh Jacobs had one offer at that time. One offer about a guy who's now one of the lead best running backs in the NFL. One offer. And it wasn't by a local team. So I kept on thinking while watching Kirk Francis the other night, no majors are offering him. No teams around here are offering him. I guess Southeast Missouri is offering him, but are very interested in him. But he can play major college football. My goodness, what do you want? He's got all the tools. So watching Kirk Francis the other night was bringing back memories to me of Josh Jacobs. Like, these guys can play major college football. Why aren't people recognizing that? People need to take a look at Kirk Francis, especially there's some teams around here who are losing their quarterbacks in the portal. So they should be taking a good look at Kirk Francis.
Very interesting. All right, guys, anything else from, well, I got a couple notes we'll get to, but anything from state title weekend you want to get into? You guys saw a lot of football in a short amount of time.
Chad Richardson Stadium at Edmond. It's a great place to hold that. It's better than ever since they did the renovations. Really impressed by the waterfall they put in, and They expanded seating on the visitor stands. I mean, now it's like there are no weaknesses to the stadium at all, from what I can tell. It's just the right size to hold these games, pretty much.
Yeah,
located.
The waterfall was sharp. Man,
yes. I mean, kudos to them. They do. And the UCO, it seems like they really want it. Press box and they just seem very accommodating there. So it's a great combination there. And it's if you're going to be watching 5 games in just over a span of 48 hours, that's a great place to do it at.
And the contract is up with the OSSAA, right, Barry?
In another year or so.
Oh, okay. I thought this was a completion. Okay, my bad.
I mean, Dean, I think
it was another year.
I think they should have another year left.
Okay. All right, getting ahead of myself. All right, let's move on to what we call our final thoughts, where you each get 30 seconds. Dean, you go first. Final thoughts.
It was fun this past weekend because this was the first time since August 26th, or maybe it was 25th, that me and Barry Lewis got to share a press box together and take in the high school game. And we didn't get to just do 1, we got to do 5. So we get to share some thoughts with him and have a good time this weekend with him. That was a pretty cool time, and I was happy for that.
And my final thought is thanks to all the coaches and players who've been so accommodating throughout the season to help us bring you all the coverage that we have. Because I mean, without their cooperation, it'd be a lot harder to do the stories that we do. And so I just want to thank them for all those coaches and players who have helped us out, and also for the feedback we get from the readers, good and negative. So, because we want to hear constructive criticism of what we can do to make our coverage even better. So we appreciate all the feedback as well.
Absolutely. We can't cover high schools to the degree that we cover them without the participation of the coaches and the players. So appreciate all that they do for us, and appreciate Barry, you and Dean for all the work you have done this season, along with columnist Bill Haston. Like I've said many times, our high school coverage is my favorite thing that we do. Love consuming our content. So great stuff, guys. As always, I know it's been a long season. You'll kind of turn your focus to other sports now. Barry and Dean, you guys will get going on the all world and all state teams. That'll be coming probably sometime in January, right, Barry?
Yes, we'll have the all world teams for all the fall sports in late January. And football coaches who are watching this, I'll be sending out your nomination forms this week. All the other sports should have received your forms inquiries already from Bryce McInnes, who is handling that. And yes, be very interesting to see how all our postseason honors go in football. Just started thinking about it. So many great performances, and it'll be interesting the way it shakes out.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, we'll catch up next Monday. Thank you.
Sounds good.